Welcome back. Chinese President Xi Jinping embarked on a three-nation tour across Southeast Asia this week, aiming to strengthen Beijing's economic and strategic influence in the region. The visit comes at a critical time as China navigates an ongoing tariff war with the United States. With trade tensions rising, Xi is expected to push for deeper regional cooperation on infrastructure, investments and security, seeking to position China as a stabilizing force in Asia. But it's not just trade. China's military ambitions in the Indian Ocean are also growing. This also comes at a time when the Quad security cooperation has taken a backseat under Trump. Arzan, Tarapore, a research scholar at Stanford University, has argued that America needs to get serious about building military power in the Indian Ocean alongside its Quad partners. To discuss this argument, joining us right now is Arzan Tarapore himself. Arzan, let me begin by asking you, this clearly is a worry in the region that there will be an Indo-Pacific pivot to China. Do you feel that the current US administration, and looking at its domestic priorities, is committed security-wise to the Indo-Pacific and would like to take that relationship a notch higher?
Thanks very much for having me. It's a real honor to be on. Listen, I think when it comes to trying to discern the direction of the Trump administration, we always confront the issue of uncertainty, right, and unpredictability. The one thing that I would say with some confidence is that when the Trump administration, when Washington looks out around the world, the Indo-Pacific is certainly one of those areas that is always going to be one of its top priorities. Now, how that actually manifests in policy is going to be a different question. But clearly, senior officials in the Trump administration have made clear that China is a significant rival of the United States, whether it comes to trade policy or somewhat more ambiguously on strategic matters. And so the article that I've written is an argument that says that Washington should get serious not only about China per se, or those strategic issues that have traditionally been of concern to Washington, but also to look and think more systematically about the Indian Ocean.
Right. Speaking to you about the meetings that have happened place over the last few weeks, how important are those meetings of military leaders? Of course, foreign ministers met in January, but do you think now the Quad will come out with its, not its military ambitions, but its clear ambitions to secure the Indo-Pacific by military means, by more military drills in the region?
So there's a number of different things that the Quad does, right? And so traditionally for the last few years, a lot of what the Quad has done has focused primarily on what it calls providing international public goods. That is, doing things that help countries of the region become more resilient to build their capacity. And I think that's critical. The interesting thing and the relatively new thing is that in recent months, there seems to be a growing appetite for the Quad to do even more work when it comes to security. Now, security has traditionally taken a backseat in the Quad's agenda. The Quad's agenda has been usually dominated by things that are not security, even though security work has continued, albeit at a lower profile. Now, the interesting thing is that there is an opportunity or a sense that the Quad may rethink how it provides security to the region. I don't think this should be at the expense of other things that the Quad does, but the argument that I make is that security is an international public good. And so if the Quad is serious about providing international public goods to the region, then security should be part of that.
Right. Give us a sense of the Trump administration's priorities on the Indo-Pacific. What do you think is the message that J.D. Vance will be bringing to India? He's coming to India next week. This is the first high-level visit from the United States. And Donald Trump, of course, will be visiting in September or October this year. But how prominently will the Quad and the Indo-Pacific cooperation figure in those discussions between J.D. Vance and the Indian government?
So look, I hope certainly that greater coordination among or between the United States and its allies and partners should be a key part of any American policy in the Indo-Pacific. Now, like I said, China is obviously and always going to dominate American policy in the region. But I think a key part of US policy to the region can and should and probably will remain the continued cooperation that the US does with its allies and partners, including India, right? So India is obviously not an ally, not a formal ally, and won't become one. But the United States has for decades recognized that India is one of the key powers of the region, and that the United States must engage it. And so when it comes to American priorities, obviously a lot of what the Trump administration is trying to do is driven by domestic politics, right? It's his domestic agenda. And so regional politics and regional dynamics have to be consistent with that. They have to fit in with Trump's domestic agenda, which is why we see issues like tariffs dominating so much of the foreign policy agenda so far. But I think as things settle down, as the Trump administration settles down and reaches some sort of equilibrium in coming weeks and months, what we'll see is hopefully a return to some to the mean, a reversion to the mean, where the United States does also pursue policy agendas in concert with partners and allies like India.
All right.
And for India, the relationship is partly about strategic coordination. It's partly about economic trade, etc. But it's also largely and recently about things like cooperation on technology. And I think every indication thus far, including with Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington, those sorts of the key pillars of the relationship will remain the key pillars of the relationship. And I hope that the US and India and the Quad keep working along those lines.
All right, Arzan, Tarapore, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let's also focus on Xi Jinping, Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Malaysia, Cambodia, and Myanmar. And he has sent out a message that the relationship with these countries will be very strong in future. The camaraderie and brotherhood will continue, and China wants to foster very close people-to-people ties, business ties, and industrial ties with these nations as well. Now, the Wall Street Journal has argued that Xi Jinping is on a charm offensive, and he's on an outreach mission, not just to countries in Southeast Asia, but also Europe, to make sure that the trading relationship with China and all these nations remains intact despite what's happening with the United States with the tariff wars. Peter Seidel of the Wall Street Journal is joining us. Peter, thank you very much for being with us on the program. Give us a sense of the big message that Xi Jinping is trying to send out through his visit to Malaysia, to Cambodia, and Myanmar.
Thank you. Xi's visit is sending a message on several levels. One is, as you pointed out, he's trying to show that China is a friend to the nations in Southeast Asia, the nations in the region. He wants to present China as a reliable trade partner in contrast to the US, which has placed tariffs, removed them, adjusted them on every country that it trades with, most notably Vietnam, which is a key trading partner for the US and China. And the other message Xi is sending is the global message. This is his first trip abroad since Trump took office. And the message to the world is, we're here to build alliances. China is a steady, stable partner and can be a good trading partner for countries not just in Southeast Asia, but throughout Asia, Europe, Latin America. So come to us with your trade, even if you've been spurned or find the US to be too unpredictable to deal with.
Right. So, Peter, even as countries like Vietnam, like Europe, are ready to make concessions for the United States in order to avoid those very high tariffs, do you also feel that a pivot towards China is very much possible under these current circumstances?
I think that China would like to present its case that's possible. I think that the nations in the region in Southeast Asia, as well as Europe, this is not the first time they've dealt with China. They're not going to be easily convinced by a message of stability. China, since Trump launched the trade war, even starting with Canada and Mexico, China has been promoting the message that it's a force for global good, for globalization, for integration and harmony. While China can present itself as stable, given the stability of the Chinese leadership, the region and Southeast Asia in particular knows that there are challenges. One is on the economic front. China now has a lot of goods that are not going to go to the U.S. Its trading partners in Southeast Asia can't take them all in, can't take in that much at all. And the region also knows about security concerns, territorial concerns in Southeast Asia, in the South China Sea in particular, tensions with countries such as the Philippines, and in particular, China's Xi Jinping's visit to Vietnam, which kicked off this tour. Vietnam is a country that is deeply embedded economically with the United States. China is Vietnam's top trading partner, but the U.S. is only a little bit behind. So it's going to be very difficult for Vietnam in particular to say, okay, China's our friend and the U.S. isn't. Vietnam, like all of these countries, is going to have to balance both superpowers.
Right. Peter, my final question, what would be the expectation from China in terms of dropping some of the irritants in the trading relationship? Yes, countries want to manufacture in China, have a trade partnership with China because China provides a skilled workforce, manufacturing at scale. But there are problems also that Western companies have been facing there. What are some of the barriers that countries in Europe and also in Southeast Asia would want China to drop?
China's long-standing issues for countries in Europe, for example, intellectual property has been a concern about China's ability to protect intellectual property. There are consistent concerns about dumping of goods because China subsidizes goods. Exports can be cheaper and compete with, for example, European automobile industry. A lot of trade partners may see this as an opportunity to persuade China to be more cooperative, less focused on making China great and more on the mutual benefits of trade. But while China might see some more integration, for example, Xi oversaw a deal with Vietnam to improve road and rail infrastructure. China might become more integrated with these countries of the region, but the likelihood that some of the trade irritants and security irritants are going to go away, it's very unlikely.
All right, Peter Seidel, thank you very much for joining us. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to CNBC TV 18.